Hi all, it's me Gemma at Story and a Song, and I wanted to talk today about my top 10 favourite fantasy books of all time. Now, when I say my top 10 favourite fantasy books of all time, I mean this is a very subjective thing to me. Some of these are not what you would call high literature or high fantasy. Some of them have issues that have become apparent over time, and some of them are maybe a tad obscure, I don't know. But certainly quite a few of these I've not seen being discussed on BookTube. They fall more into the majority of the realm of adult fantasy. So I also apologise for any chewing noises in the background. Finn is being occupied by eating a rawhide bone, so he is happily over there chewing, so I excuse if he interrupts at all. I have my list. I even wrote it down in advance, and number one on the list is Diamond Throne by David Eddings. Now, this edition, this copy also has a lot of sentimental value to me. I bought it on holiday with my grandparents, I think about 1995, and it was the last holiday that I took with my nana, who sadly passed away later on that year, and it was the first time I really devoured adult fantasy on my own. So this copy has a lot of sentimental value to me. But it is set in a high fantasy world where there are gods and knights and all that sort of stuff, and a young queen has been poisoned, and to save her life she has been placed in a throne of diamond, which is sustained by the life force of 12 knights, and to rescue her they have to find this magical MacGuffin called Behelium. That is the only thing that can cure this particular poison, and until they do that, knights will continue to die as they give their life force to save their queen. It is a really, really great fantasy. There are, as with David Eddings, I think I've mentioned before, some of his lines on like gender and things I don't necessarily agree with now, but I didn't notice them when I was younger. It's really amazing. I really love it. I think if you like high fantasy, like maybe Tad Williams, that sort of thing, then you would probably like this. There are some great monsters, there are some petty gods. I really, really love it, and that's why it's number one on this list, both for sentimental value and I just think it's really good. This original one, the Millennium, is a trilogy, and then there is a second trilogy that follows the same characters called the Tamuli. I thoroughly recommend both of them, and yeah, I just really love this book and I will always hang on to this particular edition. Now, next of all, I don't think this one is a surprise either, is The Wheel of Time by Robert Jordan. This is also a copy with some sentimental value, because this I think was originally my aunt's copy and she lent it to me about 20 years ago and has never got it back. I am 34, by the way. I have been reading fantasy since I was about 10, something like that, pretty young. And what can I really say about The Wheel of Time that other people haven't said? It's a fantasy that's full of archetypes and tropes and things like that. Again, it's got its problems, but I really, really love this world. I think the writing style is amazing, and my copy falls open like on this one particular scene, and if you've read these books, they're talking about Manatharin, the city that was in this particular area before, and one of the main characters is telling a story about Manatharin and the fall of it and stuff, and I just love that scene so much. You will know from the get-go who is the chosen one. There's no surprises. Like I say, it's full of tropes, but if you like fantasy, don't let the sort of dude bro image of this series put you off. I think if you like fantasy, you will like this, and it's already complete. There's 13 books, and the last couple were finished off by Brandon Sanderson. I know he's very popular in BookTube. So again, I have reread this many times, and I would encourage everyone to read it. And I'm really looking forward to the Amazon Prime series, so that should be fun to see. This will be my version of Shadow and Bone casting. I might actually do a reaction video to the casting for this. I don't know if anyone would be interested in my opinions on that, but I might do one. So yeah, Wheel of Time, read it. It's good. So the next book on my list, I don't actually have my copy because I lent it to my stepdad and he has been really enjoying it, and that is the Rivers of London series by Ben Aronovich. And this is about a young policeman who discovers magic in London. He thinks he sees a ghost, he goes to investigate, and he is brought into this whole world of magic and sort of wonder, and it's really great. It's written, as I say, by Ben Aronovich. There's about 5 books I think in the series so far, and each one covers different sort of, obviously there's a sort of baddie of the book, but the first one I think everyone should give a shot. If you are looking for a slide maybe from YA into more adult fantasy, I think that the Rivers of London books would really work because they're not very explicit. They do have some of the sort of YA tropes to them, and I think it would be a good starting place for someone to just get into fantasy in general. Thoroughly recommend them. Yeah, Rivers of London. And the next one I would say on my list is The Bone Dolls Twin by Lynn Flelling. I talk about this book every time I talk about books that are underrated or are my favourites, because it is all of those things and more. This follows a country called Scala, and there has been a prophecy that as long as a queen of this certain line rules the country, then the country will always do well and it will never be taken over, things like that. But there was a queen who was sort of very cruel, sort of despotic, mad queen, and her son takes over the throne and then tries to sort of subvert things from being a line of queens to being kings. And his sister gives birth to twins, one boy and one girl. Now, I'm not spoiling anything because it happens right at the beginning of the book. They decide to disguise the girl twin as the boy twin and sacrifice the boy twin to do this. And that is the backbone of this series, is about Tobin growing up. She doesn't know that she's a girl to start off with. She does think that she's a boy. There is some interesting bits about gender in this series, and I'd be interested for someone who's trans, who's read it, to do a review on it. I'd really like to know what they think, if it's good or not. Yeah, I'd just really like to see that. I've had a look and I still can't find one. So she is hidden as her brother, who is haunting them as a ghost. And obviously they're trying to hide her. As she gets older, it gets harder. And then obviously they're trying to put her on the throne as queen. Now this is a 3-book trilogy. Obviously it's 3 books, so it's a trilogy. Bone Dolls Twin, The Hidden Warrior, and The Oracle's Queen. Really good. Highly recommend Lynn Flelling, and also the Night Runner series of hers as well. So next on my list is a middle grade book, and that is Wild Magic by Tamora Pierce. I picked this book up when I was very young. I think I got it in Bargain Books. You can tell how old it is because it's part of the Point series, when they still did Point Fantasy, which was a very long time ago. And it is about a girl called Dain who has what they call wild magic, and that means that she can talk to and interact with animals in special ways. And Dain has had a bit of a tragic life. You know, a bit of a tragic event happened to her. Her mother and her grandfather were murdered by bandits, and she has had to go on the run. She runs into a woman called Onua. She's taken on as an assistant horse mistress, and things go on from there. She becomes embroiled in the doings of the sort of great and the good of her adopted country of Tortal. I love this book. It follows on from The Song of the Lioness, and it definitely reads a bit younger than The Song of the Lioness, so I would say this is probably good for younger readers. Whereas Song of the Lioness has some bits in that I would say are sort of maybe more for like 14, 15, 16 year olds. I would say this would maybe be good for, as I say, reading a bit younger, and it's just really good. It's got 4 books in the series. I highly recommend you check it out, especially as a starter for. And then we have Orion by Maggie Fury. Now, this is a 4-book series. These are a bit more chunky. These are adult fantasies. So Orion is about a mage, funnily enough, called Orion. I don't want to spoil too much of the storyline. It is about a woman growing into her power. She is very powerful. There are magical MacGuffins, there are winged folk, there are merfolk, there are dragons. I really enjoyed it. It does have its problems, doesn't most things, but one of her companions is a talking leopard. Talking panther. It's really good. I read it years and years ago. Finn, come away. Come here. I read it years and years ago. I read it alongside my mum. We both really enjoyed it, and I recently rebought the series because I wanted to read it again and still really enjoyed it a second or third. So now for something a bit more recent, and that is Nevernight by J. Kristoff. This has been my favourite recent series. It is about, I think as everyone knows, a girl called Mia Corvair whose entire family are murdered, so she becomes an assassin to avenge them. And the last book, Dark Dawn, has just come out, so the trilogy is complete. I have not yet read Dark Dawn, but I love Nevernight, I love God's Grave, and I'm sure that I'll love Dark Dawn when I read it as well, so this has definitely earned its place on my favourite fantasy books. Another recent series is the Ancestors series by Mark Lawrence. The first book in this series is actually Red Sister. I'm holding up Grey Sister, but that's upstairs. Red Sister's upstairs, so I'm holding up Grey Sister instead. This is about another girl training to be basically an assassin nun, and it's really interesting because it's got a little bit of elements of sci-fi, quite in the way that it's much better written than this, but I don't know if you remember the Pern series by Anne McCaffrey, which was all like fantasy and about dragons, and then sort of towards the end the sort of sci-fi element crept in. This reminded me of that in a strange way. It's, as I say, it's much better written. But it does follow Nona Grey and her relationships within the convent and how she becomes part of the wider story of this world. Highly recommend it. Again, it's a finished trilogy, so you don't need to wait for any more books to come out. I would be a major player in this story. Again, I won't spoil it, but I highly recommend it. It's just, yeah, I love this story so much. It is so high fantasy in terms of it's almost got a mythology to it. It's got that feel of mythology because it is so tropey. It's got that feel of you have heard this story before, but it's told in such a good way. So that's why David Eddings gets 2 entries on my list and why I think you should read the Bulgarian. Now, this is a 5-book series, and there is a second series that follows Garion, and that's called The Mallorean, which is also 5 books, and it's also really good, and you should also read that. And last of all, Harry Potter. How could I leave this off the list? I've actually got a bonus one as well, so it's actually 11, but we'll not quibble. So I came fairly late to Harry Potter. I was in high school when I started reading it, and I was lucky enough to sort of be into when some of the books were still coming out, like Goblet of Fire and the last sort of 3 books I went to launch parties for. I won't show you any pictures of me dressed up in my cloak and everything, but it was a lot of fun and very good to be involved with. I have a couple of different editions of this, but I have been picking up the Slytherin editions of the books, mainly because they are really, really gorgeous looking books. And I'm also a Slytherin, as confirmed by the new Pottermore test. Once again, I mean, the inside of this is just stunning and I love it. So I will continue to collect these. Why I love it, it also does the chosen one trope, but it builds such a world along with it that I think you overlook the sort of tropey, repetitive parts of it. Like, there's an old wizard, he is the mentor, the old mentor is definitely going to die, you know, that's the way it goes. And I loved the characters. I loved Hermione, I remember loving Ron, I just really, it's just a really good book for kids, and it grows up with kids as they go. By the time they get to the last book, you know, you're a bit older. I still hate the epilogue, I'm not gonna lie to you. The major thing that bugs me about these books is that everyone ends up with the person that they were with in high school, which is just, and they all seem to marry dead young. Which Harry Potter's meant to be, I think, about the same age as me, maybe like a little bit younger, and that always bothered me. The epilogue totally bugged me, so that's the only thing. We all know the story, I'm not going to go into it, but Harry Potter, we've probably all read it. Now this is a sort of bonus. This was meant to be a top 10, but when I was getting the books out to do this video, I came across this book and had to put it on, and that is The Wee Free Men by Terry Pratchett. It is the beginning of the Tiffany Aching books. It is set within the Discworld. It is about a young girl called Tiffany Aching who lives on the Chalk, and her younger brother goes missing. He is kidnapped by the Queen of the Fairies, and Tiffany has to get him back. Now, Tiffany, she's got the help of the Knack Feagle, a band of tiny disreputable pixies known as the Wee Free Men, and they will fight anything. And what I love about Tiffany is she is sensible. She has what she refers to as first thoughts and second thoughts, which I think is one of Terry Pratchett's sort of greatest things he put down on paper, because it's like, I think of first and second thoughts as the first thought you have that's maybe influenced by prejudice or a stereotype or something like that, and the second thought is the one that comes in after and sort of critically thinks about things. And I love Tiffany. I think she is one of the best characters in the Discworld, and Terry Pratchett was also very, very proud of Tiffany Aching as well. Her and Sam Vimes are my favourite characters in the Discworld. I highly recommend them. But the Tiffany books are more YA, and if kids are looking for a place to start on the disc, I recommend the Tiffany books. I would recommend it to anyone actually, because I do love them. Discworld in general I would always recommend, but I'm not that much of a fan of the books about Rincewind and the Wizards. I tend to skip them. I like later Pratchett rather than earlier Pratchett, so I kind of started here. So that is it from me. This is my top favourite fantasy books. Some of them are not surprises at all to anyone who's seen any of my videos before. Some of them might be a surprise, and some of them are really there more for nostalgia's sake than anything else. I read them before I was much more of a critical reader, and I sometimes am almost afraid to go back and read things more critically because I think, oh, I don't want to not enjoy them. But read them for yourself and tell me what you think. If they are any of your favourite books, I would love to know. And as always, leave me your video links, your channels, anything you think I would like in the comments. It's been brilliant as usual. Take care.